Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we'll work on how we can follow and unfollow users. So this type of action is really simple actually, so this video should be really short. All you have to do is do a couple of writes and reads from the database in order to make sure we get the most updated data from the database, depending on if we are following a user or not. So this should be like 3 functions that we have to work on. It should be really fast, so yeah, let's do it. If the video is going a little too slow for you, then feel free to change the speed of the video in the video settings. Okay, so starting up, we are going to go into Firestore and try to understand what's going on with the database at this point and how we are going to control followers and unfollowing actions within our app. So I have set up in the users collection for each document, user document, we are going to have 2 collections, one for the followers and one for the following. So anytime we follow a user, let's say we are this user, the BD, B, and X, whatever. If we follow the HD5, then BD will appear within the followers of HD, and in the BD document, it will appear, HD will appear under following. This way we'll keep track of how many users are following each other, and we'll be able to show a list of users that are being followed or followed by any user at any time. So again, Firebase is probably not the best option for this type of action, especially when we try to do the feed. But for this type of actions, it is actually pretty simple, and don't worry about duplicate actions, duplicate data, as this type of database generally has to have duplicate data. One other thing is if we want to keep account of how many users are following another user or something like that, then it would be probably better to use Firebase functions so that it triggers a function anytime a user follows another, and in that way we are able to increment a counter or decrement depending on if it is a follow or unfollow action. Okay, so here we are in the work environment, and the first thing that we are going to do or check out is to go into the profile that we are with the user that we are currently logged in with. And as you can see, we are logged in with subscribe@simcoder.com. However, if we go into SimCoder, for example, this is another account, we see that we get the edit profile button. This isn't ideal, as this button should be replaced by a follow or unfollow button if the profile we are looking at isn't the one that we are from the user that we are currently logged in with. So we first have to go into services, and we have to write a function which will detect if the user that we pass along, the user's ID that we pass along, is a user that we are currently following. And this is easily done by going to the following collection of the user that we are currently logged in with and seeing if an ID of the user that we are trying to view, if you are following, exists within this list. This is really easy to do, as we only have to employ a stream. So I'm going to actually come here and copy the get user info, and I'm going to place it below the query by name. Come in here, and I'm going to say, call it is following. And is following is going to receive the one UID of the user that we are trying to view if he's following the other user, and the user that we want to know if is being followed by the user that's passed along within the first parameter. Okay, so let's make this bigger. Collapse that, okay? And coming in here, we are going to keep the same collection, so collection users, obviously, with the document UID. Then we have another collection, which in this case will be following. Then we'll have a doc, and this doc will be for the other ID. All right, And we have the snapshots. Now, we won't parse these into anything because we are only interested to know if this returns a snapshot that exists or a snapshot that doesn't exist, because, well, depending on those, we'll know if the user is currently being followed by the user corresponding to this UID. Okay, so we will return a boolean in the case of this function because, well, it will return true if the other user is being followed by UID, and it will return false otherwise. So in this case of map, we, instead of parsing it into any other function, we can do something that's really much simpler. In this case, we'll get the snapshots, and the snapshots will return simply snapshot exists. This is a function which you can use in order to figure out, as the name implies, if the snapshot exists or not, and if it returns something that's actually usable and exists within the database or not. So it does exactly what we need. So now we are able to go into the profile screen, and let's come into main, profile, open that up, and we'll go down below into where we have edit profile. And in the edit profile, instead of flat button, I'm going to replace this by a text button, as a flat button has been deprecated for a while, and this way we can keep everything as updated as possible. And we are going to do some conditional rendering in here because, well, everything depends on the current state of the app and who we are logged in with at the moment. So we are going to check if the current logged in user's UID corresponds to the UID of the profile that we are trying to view within this string that we pass along from the arguments when we call this route. So in order to do this, it is really simple. All you have to do is do an if, a normal if, and that way you can employ some conditional rendering within Flutter. No need for special packages, even though some people say that online, but this looks clean and it is easy enough to employ. So in this case, it will be if firebase auth.instance.current-user.uid equals to UID, which is the parameter that we pass along in order to know which profile to display, then we'll simply show the text button. And you can leave it like that. We have, if you can remember, a row with children, which is an array, and we have the first one which comes in here, and in this case it is conditionally rendering the circle avatar or the icon. Then we have this if, which will check if the currently logged in user equals to this UID. And then we'll start checking if the currently logged in user is following the user that we are currently displaying. Because, well, if this if fails, then it will move on to the next one, and we'll assume that this profile doesn't correspond to the currently logged in user. But for now, we must add yet another stream provider, which we'll get from the user service, not the post service. So user service, and then we say is following, and we'll pass along firstly the currently logged in user's ID. So firebase auth.instance.current-user UID. Then we'll pass along the UID, which is again the user that we are currently viewing. So now we'll be able to easily access this data by coming down below, and after this if, we are going to add a comma, and we are going to say else if. And first of all, we'll say if firebase auth.current-user's UID is different from the UID, as that's one important statement that has to be true. And now we come to the part where we check if the user is following the user that this user is currently viewing. So in this case, it will be provider.auth bool, and within parentheses, context. So in this case, it will check this if statement, and if it is true, Then we know that we have to show a text button. So I'm going to grab this one from up top. And this has an error because in here it doesn't have a comma. So we have an if else, and they must be obviously connected. So else if this is true, then that means that we have to show the button follow. And instead of navigator push named, we'll have a to-do, which is write follow action. Okay, and that's easy enough. However, now this user, we should be already following this user because the button didn't show up. So let's take care of the third and final if statement. And let's remove that comma, which is if this provider is equal to true. And in that case, we'll show unfollow. And if everything is correct, then this button should appear right away. So let's try and save this. Okay, and unfollow appears. This is awesome. Now we are able to actually write the follow and unfollow actions within our user service. So yeah, let's do it. Okay, so jumping back into the user.dart, we are going to write a future function which will return void. And first of all, we'll write the follow user, which will receive the an UID. And I'll explain this in a second. This will be an async function, so don't forget to write async after this, as we'll be writing to the database. So that's a requirement. And there we go. So whenever we want to follow a user, this function is going to be called, and the user that the currently logged in user wants to follow will be passed along within this UID variable. So as I've said, we'll have to write to two collections. So we'll write to the currently logged in users following collection and the user that we are currently trying to follow, followers collection. One better way of doing this, even though it is slightly more complicated, would be to have a trigger within Firebase functions in which whenever we follow a user, it will trigger and then write to that user being followed followers collection. However, let's not try and overcomplicate this. Let's do it as easily as possible with just two writes from within our front end. So in this case, we'll say Firebase Firestore.instance .collection users .doc. And for this document, we'll pass along the currently logged in users ID. So Firebase auth.instance current user UID. Then we'll pass along the collection, which in this case will be following. And we'll add the doc, which will be the user that we are trying to follow, that user's UID, and then we'll simply set it. So we'll set it to nothing because we don't need to keep track of anything else. We don't need any parameters within this document. We just need it to be empty and the UID to exist. Now, if we wanted to save the time at which we followed this user, then you could save it, obviously, using the Firestore timestamp, but that's not necessary for this case. Let's keep it as simple as possible. And then for the other user, we are going to add to the followers. So in this case, we'll have to exchange the currently logged in user's ID for the UID, the other user's ID. As easy as that. Now, if we can easily add the unfollow action. So just by duplicating the follow users function, we are going to add yet another one called unfollow. But in this case, instead of set, we'll call delete. And this way we'll be deleting this document from the database. And one cool thing is because we are using in the isFollowing function a stream, we'll be able to automatically receive that information, as we are always receiving data from this listener, from our Firestore database. Then the unfollow button will automatically update to follow, and vice versa. So as easy as that. Now, saving this file, we are going to come in here into the profile.dart, and we are going to say that user service dot unfollow user UID. That's simple, and we can do the same thing for the follow. So like that, and save it. Now it should be working. So let's give it a try and see if everything checks out and if the database updates automatically as it should. Okay, so as we can see, I have the database open, and I have the users that we aren't following at the moment. So again, I'm logged in with an account, this account, which is called subscribe@simcoder.com, and I'm trying to follow this user, which, if I'm not mistaken, is this K4. There we go. So we are trying to follow this one. Let's see if the database actually updates as it should. So let's first of all go into the currently logged in users document, and let's try and follow this user. Okay, so this K4 appears, which is great, as that's the expected action. Now, going into the K4, we expect to see the BDB there. Okay, and it is. So let's try and unfollow and see if this is deleted. And it didn't delete it. So let's come in here. And that's the reason why we didn't change the set for deletes in the case of the follower. So let's save it and try it again. So let's first follow. Okay, and now unfollowing, it should be deleted, and it is. And the same thing should happen within the BD. So let's try and follow, unfollow, and there we go. Now we are able to actually keep track of everything and display the feed. So in the next lesson, that's the part that we'll be working on. Thank you all so much for watching. We now have a following system ready, up and running, and that means that we are able to start working on the feed, which is the next video. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. So yeah, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Ciao!